Wyoming Territory, 1883, the wind was bitter. The sky bruised with dusk, and the woman walking up the dirt road into the town of Red Butte was holding nothing but a bundled baby and a name she refused to let go of. Her boots were cracked, her coat too thin, and her hands shook from more than cold. But she did not stop walking. Behind her, the trail she had come from was long buried in miles of dry, broken ground and silence. Ahead, there was nothing but a saloon, a livery stable, and a feed store with its front porch light flickering in the wind. The baby whimpered softly. "Just a little longer, sweetheart," she whispered, pressing her lips to the infant's forehead. The girl's name was Zadie, Zadie Evers. She was just shy of 6 months. And the woman holding her was her mother, Lark Evers, 23, widowed before she could take her husband's name, and now completely alone. She walked toward the livery stable, drawn to the warmth spilling from its open doors. That was when she saw him. A tall man in a sheepskin coat stood outside the barn, brushing down a chestnut gelding. His hat was low, shoulders broad, and he moved with the easy, silent confidence of someone who had spent years surrounded by land instead of people. He looked up when she stepped into the lantern light. His eyes were sharp blue but not cold. "You lost?" he asked, voice low and calm. Lark swallowed. Her throat ached from dryness. "No, not anymore." The man looked at the baby in her arms, then back at her face. He didn't ask questions right away, just stepped forward and gestured toward the barn. "Come in." Wendell cut through bone tonight. She followed him without a word. Inside, the air was warmer. The scent of hay and horses filled her lungs and made her knees weak with relief. The man grabbed a wool blanket from a saddle and handed it to her. "Sit over there, by the stove. I'll get you some water." She sat, holding Zadie close, wrapping them both in the blanket. The baby blinked up at her, cheeks red from cold. Lark kissed her softly. The man returned with a tin cup of water and crouched beside her. "I'm Xalen Ridge," he said. "This is my place." She looked at him, not sure what she saw in his face, yet kindness, maybe something steadier. "I'm Lark Evers," she said. "This is my daughter, Zadie." He nodded once, like that told him everything he needed. "You got people here?" "No. Just a name and my baby." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, plain as sunrise, "That's more than enough." Lark's eyes burned. She looked down, afraid to let herself believe him. Xalen stood. "You eaten?" She shook her head. "Not since yesterday morning." He went to a shelf, pulled down a tin of beans, and lit a flame under a small iron pan. The way he moved, quiet, certain, settled something in her chest. Zadie started to cry, and Lark bounced her gently, whispering to calm her. Xalen glanced over. "She healthy?" "Yes." "Just tired, hungry too." He handed her the pan once it was warm. "It's not much. It's everything," she said after they ate. Xalen cleaned up and said, "You can stay the night here, got a cot in the back room." Lark hesitated. "I can sleep on the floor." "No, ma'am. You and that baby need rest. No one's using that cot but dust." She followed him to the room small, with a straw mattress and a folded quilt. She laid Zadie down, then turned back to him. "Thank you," she said. "I mean it." He just nodded. "Get some sleep." The door closed gently behind him. Lark sat on the edge of the cot, her body aching, her mind still caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. She leaned over and kissed her daughter's cheek. They had made it. They were safe, at least for tonight. The next morning, Lark woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of hooves. She stepped out into the barn, Zadie against her chest. Xalen was saddling up a black mare. "You headed out?" she asked. He looked over his shoulder. "Just into town, got to check on supplies. You're welcome to stay here. There's oats in the tin if you get hungry." She blinked. "Why are you helping me?" He paused, then looked directly at her. "Because someone should have, before now." She had no answer for that. He mounted up, tipped his hat, and rode off down the road. 2 days later, she was still there. Xalen came and went quiet, respectful, but never asked her to leave. On the 3rd morning, she was outside hanging Zadie's washed clothes on a line strung between 2 fence posts when Xalen stepped up beside her. "You planning to keep moving?" She looked at him, then at the baby playing in the grass nearby. "I do not know where else to go." He nodded slowly. "You do not have to go anywhere." That night after dinner they sat on bales of hay. Zadie slept inside. "How long were you on the road?" he asked. "A while," he waited. "My husband died last winter. Fever took him fast. We were in Colorado Springs then. I stayed as long as I could, until I could not anymore." He looked down at his hands. "I know what that feels like. You lost someone," he nodded. "My brother died in a cattle stampede 5 years back. After that I stopped drifting, bought this land, built it up." She watched him in the firelight. There was pain in him, but it had not hardened him. It had made him careful. Strong, she looked at the fire. "I do not want charity." "This is not charity," he said softly. "This is a place, and it can be yours too." She met his eyes. "Why?" he shrugged. "Because you are brave, and you love that girl like she is gold, because I want you here." Her heart stumbled. He stood. "I will not push, but I meant it when I said that baby and your name. That is more than enough." Then he went to check the horses, and Lark sat there, heart full, fire warm, thinking maybe, just maybe, they had finally come home. Come April, the thaw came slow. The snowmelt ran slick over the hardpan, turning the trail into a ribbon of brown water that soaked boots through by midday. Lark began rising before the rooster crowed, wrapping Zadie close and stepping out to the yard to bring in wood or draw water from the pump before Xalen stirred. It wasn't asked of her, he never once expected it, but something in her refused to idle. She'd spent too long surviving to sit still. That morning, she found him in the east pasture, stooped beside the fence line where a post had gone soft at the base. His coat was off, sleeves rolled up. She hadn't seen his forearms bare before, whether dark skin, lean muscle, a long scar running from wrist to elbow like a pale river. He didn't look up when she approached. "You always fix things yourself?" she asked. He tapped the shovel against the earth. "I trust my hands more than another man's guesswork." She shaded her eyes with one hand, watching as he drove the spade into the dirt. "Town got anyone who sells fence posts?" "Amos Bright does, but he charges more than he ought to. He figures folks don't have the time to cut their own." "And you do." He leaned on the handle, squinting toward the tree line. "I make time." Zadie stirred on Lark's hip, and Xalen turned his gaze to her. "She growing fast," he said, softer now. "She's starting to sit up without help." He gave a short nod. "She'll be walking before the year's out." Lark smiled, then looked past him toward the hills. "You ever think about leaving this place?" His answer came slow. "I did once, before I bought it. Rode through Oregon, Kansas, even up into Dakota Territory, but I kept coming back here. Couldn't say why not then. And now, I reckon I know." She didn't press. He stood and reached for the new post, setting it into the hole he'd dug. She stayed quiet, watching him tamp down the earth, steady and sure. He didn't waste movement. Every swing, every press of his boot had purpose. When he finished, he brushed the dirt from his hands. "You want to learn how to do this?" She raised an eyebrow. "Fencing, among other things." "I figure if you're staying, might as well teach you what the land asks for." Lark glanced at Zadie, who had drifted back to sleep. "You sure you want someone underfoot?" He met her eyes. "I'm sure I'd rather have someone beside me." That afternoon, he showed her how to sharpen tools without stripping the edge, how to oil leather so it stayed soft, how to hitch a horse without cinching too tight. She listened close, hands careful, eyes narrowed in concentration. When she made a mistake, he didn't correct her with words. He simply showed her again, slower. Days passed like that, quiet and full. The work tethered her to the land in a way she hadn't expected. Her body ached, but it was a clean ache, earned and honest. Zadie napped in a basket set near the tack room door or watched from a blanket spread under the cottonwood. At night, Lark would rub the small of her back and feel the tiredness settle deep, but not heavy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Xalen returned from the north field carrying a bundle of wild onions. Lark was stitching a tear in Zadie's blanket on the porch. "These'll go fine with the venison," he said, laying them on the step. "You hunted today. Set snares yesterday. Checked them late." She threaded her needle again. "You always bring back more than you need. Used to trade the extra, don't need to now." She didn't say anything right away. Then, glancing up, she asked, You ever think about having more people here? He shifted, leaning against the post. You thinking about leaving? No, she said, meeting his gaze. I'm thinking about what it might mean to stay. The wind moved through the grass below, rustling like a whispered promise. He crouched beside the step, picking up one of the onions, turning it over in his hand. It means learning things slow. It means quiet days and long winters and knowing the land won't always give back. But when it does, it's worth everything. She nodded, her fingers still on the thread. I'm not afraid of quiet. He looked at her, really looked. You're not afraid of anything. She didn't agree. She didn't have to. Later, after supper, he handed her a small parcel wrapped in brown cloth. She opened it to find a pair of gloves, worn but well made, the leather softened with oil. They were my mother's, he said. She used them in the garden. Lark ran her thumb over the stitching. Why give them to me? He looked toward the barn, voice low. Because you remind me of her. She never let the world harden her. Lark swallowed. She must have been strong. She was. Like you. That night, after Zadie was asleep and the stars had come out clear and cold, Lark stood beneath the porch eaves and watched Xalen finish brushing down the mare. He caught her watching, and this time he didn't look away. She didn't either. By late May, the cottonwoods had leafed out in full, and the river beyond the ridge ran faster with meltwater. Lark had started keeping a garden behind the bunkhouse, the soil black and soft where Xalen had turned it with the plow. They'd planted carrots, beans, and squash, and she checked the rows each morning with Zadie cradled against her back, watching for the first signs of green. One afternoon, while the sun was still high, Xalen returned from the trading post with a bundle tied behind his saddle. He led the mare into the barn without calling out, but Lark met him there anyway, wiping her hands on her apron. You find what you needed? She asked, stepping around a barrel of oats. He untied the bundle and handed it to her. Not everything, but I got these. She unfolded the cloth and found a pair of small leather shoes, soft-soled and stitched with care. Her breath caught. They're for Zadie, he said, voice quiet. Figured she'll be crawling soon. Lark didn't speak right away. She traced the curve of the shoes with her thumb, then looked up. No one's ever brought her anything that wasn't second-hand. He adjusted the saddle girth without meeting her eyes. She's not second to anything. That evening, Lark set the shoes on the shelf above the hearth. Zadie reached for them when she saw them, fingers stretching with wonder. Later, after the girl was asleep, Lark found Xalen out by the corral, leaning against the fence rail. The moon was rising, casting silver light over the pasture. She cried when I took them away, Lark said, her voice low. She'll have them soon enough. She stepped beside him, arms folded. You always this generous? No, she looked at him, but he kept his eyes on the horses. Then why now? He hesitated, then said, because when I see her, I think about what she'll remember. I want her to grow up knowing she mattered from the beginning. Lark's throat tightened. You think about her future? I think about both of yours. The wind pushed through the grass at their feet. She turned toward him, the moonlight catching the edge of his jaw. I never thought I'd be here, she said. Not just the land a place where someone thinks about us like that. Xalen's voice dropped. No one should have to live invisible. They stood quiet for a time, the sound of a night bird calling low from the trees. Then Lark asked, do you ever miss the road? Sometimes, he admitted, but it never gave back what it took. Here I can build something, grow things, watch time mean something. She nodded, slow. I want that. He turned to her then, really turned. Do you? Yes, she said. I want to stay. Not just for the shelter or the food, I want to be part of what you're building. His gaze held hers, steady and warm. Then you are. She didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for her. But something passed between them, firm as a promise, quiet as breath. The next morning, Lark stepped into the barn with Zadie on her hip and found a cradle built from pine slats and lined with wool. She ran her fingers over the smooth joints, the careful carvings along the edge. Xalen came in behind her, brushing hay from his hands. You made this, he nodded once. Worked on it nights after you'd gone inside. She turned to face him. Why? He looked at her, unflinching. Because she's yours, and now she's ours. Lark's eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stepped closer, laid her hand on his chest. His heart beat strong beneath it. "I never had someone say that to me before," she whispered. "You do now." He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But they stood touching, and it was enough. That night, Zadie slept in her new cradle, and Lark sat beside the fire, stitches in her lap, Xalen across from her with a book in hand. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full. And for the first time in years, Lark didn't feel like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She felt like she'd finally stepped into her life. By mid-June, the days stretched long and golden, and the air held the dry sweetness of wild sage and dust. Grasshoppers clicked through the fields, and the sound of hammering echoed from the low shed behind the barn where Xalen had begun building a smokehouse. Lark had started preserving herbs in bundles beneath the porch eaves, and Zadie had taken to crawling with fierce determination, her hands always reaching for what lay just out of reach. That morning, Lark carried a pair of clean linens to the creek to wash. The water ran cold over her wrists, and the sun warmed her back through the fabric of her dress. She turned at the sound of hooves and saw Xalen riding down from the north ridge, leading a pack mule. When he reached the bank, he dismounted and tied the reins to a cottonwood root. "You went far this time," she said, wringing out a sleeve. "Traded with an old friend near the border of Shoshone land. He raises sheep now." She lifted an eyebrow. "And what did you come back with?" He untied the bundle from the mule's side and unwrapped the oilskin to reveal a bolt of blue calico, coarse but fine enough for sewing. "For you," he said. "Figured you might want a dress that's yours." She didn't touch it right away. "How long did you ride to find this?" 3 days out, 2 back. "That's 5 days." He gave a small nod. "Worth it." She looked at him for a long moment, then folded the cloth back into its wrap. "You don't owe me anything, Xalen, I know," he said. "That's not why I do it." They walked back toward the house together, the mule trailing behind. Zadie was napping under the shade of the porch, her arms flung wide in sleep. Lark stood over her for a moment, brushing a leaf from her dark hair. Xalen leaned against the post, arms crossed. "She looks like her father," Lark's hands paused. "Not much. He had lighter eyes and a sharper mouth. You miss him." She sat down slowly beside her daughter. "I miss the idea of what we were supposed to have, but not the rest." He stayed quiet. "He was kind at first," she said, eyes fixed on the child. "But he grew tired fast, thought a baby would slow him down. I think he wanted something easier than me." "You're not hard," Xalen said quietly. She looked up. "Aren't I?" "No," he said. "You're honest." "That's different." Later that day, Lark took the calico into the sewing room behind the kitchen and began cutting pieces for a new dress. The rhythm of the needle steadied her, and the fabric softened under her hands. When Zadie woke, she placed her in a basket beside the table and sang low as she worked, the tune one her mother had used to hum over bread dough and boiling kettles. That evening, they ate outside while the sky turned the color of rust and honey. Lark wore the new dress, the hem still rough at the edge, but it fit. Xalen noticed, though he didn't say anything. He just looked at her a little longer before passing the skillet. After the meal, Zadie toddled between them on unsteady legs, gripping Lark's fingers in one hand and reaching for Xalen's with the other. She shrieked with delight when he crouched to meet her, letting her press her hand to his cheek. "She trusts you," Lark said softly. "She should," he answered. They stayed there until the stars came, until the air cooled and Zadie's head bowed with sleep. Lark carried her inside, laid her gently in the cradle, then stepped back out. Xalen was still seated on the porch rail, arms resting across his knees. She joined him, taking the empty spot beside him. "I used to think quiet meant something was missing," she said, "and now it feels full." He turned slightly toward her. "There's more I want to build here," she glanced at him. "What kind of things?" "A future," he said, "with you and her in it." She didn't answer with words. She reached for his hand, her palm fitting into his like it had always meant to. He closed his fingers around hers, warm and certain. Together they sat, watching the land settle into night, the sky above as wide as forever. By late July, the hills behind the homestead burned gold in the sun, and the creek had thinned to a winding ribbon. Lark stood in the doorway with a basket of dried beans on her hip, watching Xalen haul stone from the far end of the pasture. He'd taken to building a low wall near the edge of the garden, not for protection, he'd said, but for boundary, a way to mark what was theirs. Zadie sat in a shaded patch beside the porch, legs tucked beneath her and a wooden spoon clutched in her small hand. She tapped it against the ground with steady rhythm, her attention split between the dirt and the chickens scratching nearby. Lark stepped off the porch and crossed the yard. "You mean to build that wall clear around the field?" she asked, as Xalen dropped another stone into place. He brushed the dust from his palms. "No, just enough to hold the shape of things." "Shape of what?" He looked past her toward the house. "A home." She set the basket down. "You've been working harder than usual." "There's a reason." Lark waited. "I spoke to the circuit judge when he passed through last week," he said. "Asked what it would take to make your place beside me lawful." The words settled between them, quiet but heavy as the stone. She knelt beside the basket, fingers brushing through the split beans. "You think I need a ring and a paper to stay?" "No," he crouched beside her, "but I want to give you more than a roof and safety. I want to give you my name if you'll take it." Lark didn't answer at once. She pressed her palm over the beans, feeling their dry weight, then she looked at him. "I didn't come here looking for a husband. I know. I came because I had nowhere left." He didn't shift. And now she looked toward the porch, where Zadie had fallen asleep in the shade, her head resting against the basket she'd dragged beside her. "Now I have everything I didn't know I could want," her voice caught. "You gave us stillness and room to grow." He reached out then, not suddenly, but with the care he always used around her. His hand rested lightly over hers. "You gave me reason," he said. "And I don't want to live a single season without you." She nodded once. "Then don't." They married under the cottonwood trees 2 weeks later. No crowd, just the judge, the wind, and the sound of water moving over creek stones. Lark wore the blue calico dress she'd sewn herself. Xalen wore the same coat he'd had since the first snow of that year. Zadie toddled between them, grasping fistfuls of Lark's skirt and laughing without knowing why. After the judge's words were said, and the ink dried on the paper, Xalen lifted Lark's hand and pressed it to his chest. "You're home now," he said, "and so am I." They built more than fence and garden after that. They added a second room for Zadie and a small coop for hens that Lark bartered from a neighbor in exchange for dried herbs. Xalen taught her how to repair the leather harness straps, and she taught him how to coax beeswax into candles that burned slower than tallow. One evening, as the air turned cooler and the leaves started to yellow at the edges, Lark stood in the doorway holding a bundle wrapped in soft linen. The cradle had been moved beside the hearth again. Zadie, older now, sat cross-legged on the floor with a carved horse in her lap. Xalen came in from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He saw the bundle and stopped. Lark smiled. "His name's Xali." Xalen stepped forward, gently brushed the edge of the cloth back to see the boy's face. Then he kissed Lark's temple and whispered something she didn't speak aloud. That winter they stayed close to home. The snow came heavy, but the house held fast. Lark sang to both children while Xalen carved toys from leftover pine. At night, when the fire burned low, they sat on the porch wrapped in wool, fingers laced, watching the moon rise over the ridge. They never spoke of the road Lark had walked to reach him, nor the years Xalen had spent alone before she came. They didn't need to. What mattered was the ground beneath their feet, the walls they'd raised together, and the quiet love that filled the space between each breath. Years later, when the fence posts had weathered gray and the trees behind the house grew tall enough to shade the roof at midday, the garden bloomed wide with squash blossoms and rosemary. Zadie ran with bare feet through the rows, her brother close behind, and Lark stood at the edge of it all, a worn sunbonnet in her hand and joy in her chest so deep it felt like the roots of the land itself. Xalen came up behind her, slid his hand into hers and kissed the back of her knuckles. "This," she whispered, "is the life I never dared to ask for." He pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed. And it's ours. They lived long and steady through good seasons and hard ones, always side by side. And when the time came to rest, it was with nothing left undone, nothing left unsaid. Just love, planted deep and grown true.